All right, good morning. Excuse me, grand rising, everyone. It's already the 12th of July, Saturday, 12th of July, about 10:05 a.m. We'll go ahead and get started with our session and see if we have any questions. Perhaps we may table that since we got some other stuff that we're going to talk about.
That's fine.
Okay. Any questions about anything that may have happened to you this week or where we were last week? Anything? There was a video that we looked at that was very interesting, and if we don't have any questions, let's lead off with that. Uh, I give it to Sheldon and Pastor, and let them take us where we're going this morning.
You have the introduction, Pastor Richard.
All right. This video is about particular about Black females, African females, I should say. And excuse me. And I think it gives us a lot more insight into our essence and our origins than than we have talked about. And the reason I say that is because everything that the video talks about, we've already said it, but not in one place, not at one time. And this is information that is compacted. And I thought it well if we were to take the time to not only listen at it, but have some discussion about it. Thank you. Oh, by the way,
You can continue if you want. I haven't stopped.
simply going to say that Cheryl is the one who sent it to us, sent it to me, and I express my appreciation for her having sent it. Go ahead.
And I'll put the link in the Zoom chat. Here we go.
Let's talk about the truth. There is so much discourse lately about who is native and who is indigenous, and even the nerve to bring up who is the architect of soul food. And what everyone needs to understand is that Black people are the earth. Black people are the only unmutated humanity. They told you humans came from Africa like it was a migration story. But that's not the truth. The truth is, Africa is the first face of the earth. And blackness is the source of all biology. Everyone else? Genetic drift, mutational echo, survival glitches adapted to ice and exile. Let's talk origins. The Black woman is the womb of the world. Forget the Eve in the garden story. That was a stolen metaphor. The real Eve lives in the woman's mitochondria. And not just any women. Melanin-rich, thick-hipped, thick-lipped, and copper-toned. Elegant, poised, literally perfect, planet-rooted Black women. White women don't carry the full ancestral genome. Asian, Mexican, and Native women only carry fragments. Black women carry the total code. She doesn't reproduce diversity. She births the whole species. When small African offshoot groups migrated north, they weren't evolving. They were mutating, adapting to survival, not thriving. That's where lighter skin, narrow nostrils, reduced melanin, and behavioral changes began. All signs of environmental stress, not superiority. You don't get white by evolving. You get white by forgetting the sun. And that forgetting is not advancement. It's regression. The white genome contains 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA. Let me repeat, they didn't just descend from humans. They were cavemen. Black people have 0 Neanderthal admixture. That's not a joke. That's biology. Black people are the originals. Non-Black people are the remix. The problem is, the remix decided to express its evil nature by attempting to erase the original track. Let's talk indigenous. The term indigenous was invented by settlers to decide who was native enough to be managed, named, and displaced. But indigenous is a political term, not a genetic one. And political terms can't overwrite blood memory. Being first on the continent does not make you first on the planet. However, black people being first on the planet means they are first on every continent. The black genome is Earth's source code. Everyone else is just running a copy of their biological operating system. The war against black genetics is a war against humanity. Melanin isn't pigment, it's the processor. It's the molecule that translates solar energy into life. Plants have it, animals have it, humans need it. Black people have the highest concentration of it, which means black people don't just live on Earth, they translate it. They are not just a race, they are the root species. Black isn't a color, it's the motherboard. Every other group, adaptations, mutations, and mistakes. This isn't supremacy. This is truth. Black people didn't come from Africa. Africa came from black people.
Okay. Um, are there any questions or comments about what you just heard? Anyone?
Arshay.
I want to hear, if I may, if you don't mind, what you gleaned from what was said.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Was that a question for me? I didn't catch that at the beginning.
Anyway, yeah.
Oh, okay. Many things. I agree with all of that. It is very correct. Most of all, just right off the bat, it is the sort of undoing of the sort of propaganda that has been taught to black peoples by white peoples. And when I say white peoples, it isn't necessarily the skin color, but it's, it's, you know what I mean? Like it's that mindset of sort of domination and setting yourself at the top of some artificial hierarchy that you imposed onto the rest of the world. That mindset and the sort of selfishness and confusion that is at its core was attempting to convince the rest of the more black world that they were at the top and you were at the bottom. And this video is an example of the undoing of that propaganda. Like when they say, even the subtle, kind of subtle thing there where they say humans came out of Africa, as if they were not there for a long time before simply migrating off the continent. So it's a lot of the subtle ways in which the sort of world domination desires of the white supremacist mindset tries to convince anything that is not white, as designated by them, that it is not sort of human or fully evolved or etc. or whatever. And there's a lot of ways in which our language has conformed around that idea, as opposed to our language being developed and formed within the context of the true awareness of the origin of human beings. It's formed within the context of that artificial hierarchy that the sort of mindset of domination and elitism, especially as it pertains to quote unquote white people, has tried to enforce that hierarchy onto the rest of the world. So this is in many ways a return to beginning, in the sense that it is a recognition of the true order, for lack of a better term, of things, the true hierarchy, quote unquote, of nature, not in the egotistical sense, but in the sense of the way things truly developed, and the sort of nature of identity and the being of the creator being at the top of that hierarchy, for lack of a better term, not the sort of confused misinterpretation of the nature of identity that comes out of the sort of white supremacist world conquering selfishness that is exhibited when by this mindset that we call the European mindset, the mindset of white supremacy, etc. So this seems to me like a entering back into our collective awareness of the true actual chain of connection that leads back to spirit, back to the identity of African, and back to the creator actually being at the top, again, quote unquote, of that hierarchy, as opposed to an artificial thing attempting to insert itself between us and the creator. Oh, you muted. You're muted.
Any questions about what Nick just said, or or would you like to let us know what you gleaned from this video?
This is Vermel. I have a question. In hearing the video, it really struck me pretty hard. But what I'm trying to move out of my mind is they use the term black and white. Can any of you please define again the mindset of Africans versus Europeans so I can reshape how I'm seeing this or erase out the stuff that makes me think of color? Because this is not about color. I understand that. But I need that reinforced again, please.
I can well say a couple quick things about that before any others. If you want to think about it in two different mindsets in terms of one, the first being someone who works along with the earth in a sense, if you want to look at it from that standpoint, a natural standpoint, one who is one with it, more so a partner in a sense, where they work along together and I guess you can say edify and hold up in high esteem both separate entities, but at the same time they see themselves as the same entity. Versus the latter would be more so a situation where one here is here to dominate, completely control, and is as if it is the master of the other one. It is a stepping stool. It is more so a servant in a sense to the other. I'm here to dominate you. I'm here to extract from you. I'm here to do whatever I want to do with you, but also there's no care or consideration whatsoever. Subtly is as if we're not on the same page, and one is actually more so in opposition to the other, if you want to say more so an enemy of the other in terms of the relationship and how they get along with one another. That is a very broad way of looking at it when we talk about mindset, and we see that every day in our lives with people in different, relationships and things of that nature. I'm done.
Sheldon, thank you very much. That really helps me. Thank you.
You're more than welcome.
One mindset nurtures, the other mindset destroys.
Ashe.
Any other comments or questions? Let me ask this. Since the video is so short, would you like to hear it again before you comment? Anyone? Okay.
I guess one of the things, he said a lot of things. A lot of things came to mind. Uh, I agree with Nick, and I think I'm saying part of what Nick said. It sounds to me like an invitation to return to beginning. That was one of the things I got from it. And I'll go into that in a second. Uh, there was one thing we have been saying over the years that is very real, and I never knew what that would look like. And that was we talked about racism. Black people did not start racism, and they can't end racism. I thought it interesting that someone else other than an African would mention this and take it to the macro. You said it was things we have already talked about. Wouldn't it be funny if this is where he got it from? He or she, whoever put that together, pulled it from the macro. And so that part of it I thought was interesting if you want to look at it from a spiritual perspective. The beginning to me is we talk about a new heaven and a new earth, and the things that he brought up uh, to me is was almost like saying these are the things that we got wrong, and it pointed to where things fell off the hill, sort of, and you can start over by addressing this. This is not uh, people just didn't walk out of Africa. This is what Africa really represents. This is what the African represents. This is what melanin represents. So it's an eye opener that invites us to go back to get this right. And I thought that was I thought all of it together said was highly spiritual. Not to mention that uh, it marries what we've been talking about all along, which I think is more important than we realize just yet. But yeah, a lot was said.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well,
Hey everybody, this is Audrey. Um, when I listened to it, I thought it mirrored kind of the same kind of thing that the chat B GPT was kind of saying. Um, and I know those algorithms kind of feed off of each other, but I think it is a product of having put a lot of things into the macro. And I think it was good that it was not a melanated person that said it. It was a person who was kind of open to what's happening in the universe, and willing to listen. But on the other hand, I think a lot of melanated people have been saying it, but not getting the kind of ear that this particular person has gotten. But anyway, whoever says it, as long as it gets out there, that's what matters. But I think it was I think it was pretty profound, and I think a lot of Africans need to hear it, because we've had so much of the opposite in our ears and in our heads for 400 years, maybe even longer. So it's any little bit helps to start to change the mindset, I think. And there were some really profound things said, so it gives people a lot to think about and realize. Thanks.
thank you. Anyone else? There's one thing in there that found extremely profound. When the statement was made that uh, the African did not come out of Africa, Africa came out of the African. That says to me that he's saying that the African is God. Does that make sense? In order for Africa to come out of the African, then the African is the creator God and brought everything into existence. The other thing that I gleaned from it also is that all people all came from, or everything, all people came from the womb of an African woman, but all things came from an African. The Genesis story was put into play to minimize the importance of femininity, especially the creation story. And what I mean by that is this. In the creation story, Adam comes before Eve. A man, the masculinity is said to have come into the earth, and the femininity was taken from its real boy side. That speaks volumes about who manipulated the sacred writings, because it is known and always has been known that it's from the womb of the African that all of humanity came into existence. So to switch that around was the beginning of the indoctrination of masculinity being in charge of everyone and everything. And that in itself is where the demise of order became evident. There will not be order until femininity is embraced for what it is. And that femininity being the femininity, the original femininity. And that is the femininity of the African that is represented in the physical form by the African woman. Are there any questions about that so far? Comments? Can you see that?
Yes, but just a quick comment. You said Africa came out of Africans. I would say Alkebulan came out of them.
I submit. You're right. You're right, because that's the oldest word in the earth. Okay, Bilal.
I have a quick comment as well, going back to the analogy of working opposed to. In this sense, we just want to say, just for the example, I'm gonna say Mother Nature. I'm gonna say all that is. I'm gonna say God, as Pastor Richard mentioned. It also explains or indicative of how the Akebalanin coming out of Akebalan came as that, not fighting it. So if you really want to think about what we're actually saying here is in the two mindsets or the two ideas of approaching this existence, one essentially is fighting or opposed to God, while one actually walks as God. If you really want to talk about the two mindsets or way of being that we're talking about here.
Say that again, please.
It's not going to come out as nice. We'll try. But basically, I was saying that, okay, in the first analogy, the question was asked, in the video, the concepts that are being talked about in terms of white and black. And it was said that I know that doesn't actually mean skin color or race, but what does that actually represent? And so I mentioned that one lives with and sees itself as part of the earth. It holds it up in each other up in high regard in terms of the individual, the beings, and earth. They see themselves as one. They don't try at all to abuse one another, and they care and try to take care for one another in a sense. They live as one. It is a constant giving and building up of both.
Yeah.
The latter, one works to take advantage of, to extract all that it can out of it. I'm not going to go as far as to necessarily say that it tries to punish it or beat it down, but I will say that its main goal is to extract and get all that it can for itself, and that turns out to uh, look like many different things, whether that be power, whether that to make itself feel secure in terms of the beating down. The point is all to build itself up, its own personal self interest to self. Okay. Now, going back to what Pastor Richard just talked about in terms of the Akebalanin coming out of a cable line, or in a sense, taking a cable line with it, part of that is knowing as well. So it leaves a cable line, or leaves a cable line. It takes the cable line, so it takes God with itself. It walks as God. It is a respect still for that which it sees itself, as well as that which it sees that is source and a part of. And I don't want to use the certain color terms, but the term that we're talking about, the opposite, is one that actually fights God.
Okay.
Once you look at it from that standpoint.
Yeah.
I think what's notable in that also is the idea that the African has no parts of the Neanderthal. And
Yeah.
that tells me that the mindset of the European is predicated on the reality of it being part Neanderthal as opposed to being totally African. Does that make sense?
Yes.
The idea of masculinity and femininity speaks totally to the spiritual nature of everything, as well as the statement, when the statement was made that the first on the planet is indigenous to all continents. The African is in all continents, and that is the reason every continent, or all the land masses were, or the land mass, because there's only one at that time, was called a Kabbalah, inclusive of the land mass that we are living on right now, was called a Kabbalah. So that says that the energy of the African already permeates the entire world and always has. So when we talk about the African in the diaspora, we are only looking at it from a physical perspective, as opposed to from a physical perspective that was fed to us by Europeans. if we look at it through the spiritual eye, what we see is the energy of Focabulon is all over the world. And we have dissected it, and we have minimized its power by dissecting it. And the way it has been dissected is by our embracing that since we speak different languages and have into our active cultures, yet they're different and the same at the same time. When we buy into that, when we embrace that, then we begin to see the unicity of the energy of the African as opposed to the fracturing of it. What I'm saying is there is no such thing as the African in the diaspora, because every continent on this earth was inhabited by Africans. And Focabulon means it's applied to the spiritual application of all of the earth itself. So as we see this and we began to talk about the African energy, period, without speaking of it in the diaspora, we then move from a physical description, a physical mindset of its existence, to that of a spiritual mindset of its existence. Does that make sense, or any questions about that? So when we embrace the reality that the African energy is not indigenous to any place except the entire earth, what we are accepting is the reality that femininity, excuse me, is the source of all life. And the cosmic mother, the melanated queen of life, is the beginning of everything that is. And even though there are people on the continent of Africa who see themselves different than we are, and those on this with us who see themselves separate from the African, when in reality, all of us are the same in terms of the origins and energy. What we have done is embraced an attitude of the Neanderthal. And in embracing the attitude of the Neanderthal, we have undergirded the divisions that Neanderthal mindset brought into existence, separating people, and at the same time indoctrinated people to be mentally separate. And when we embrace that, we build fences between us and the essence of all of our spirituality, and that causes conflict within us, as well as conflict between femininity and masculinity, because we have erroneously embraced the Neanderthal concept or the European concept of what femininity is and what masculinity is. We have embraced the lie that man was brought into this earth first and then the woman. That's manipulation that we have embraced, and we have talked about it frequently as we have spoken over the years about Eve coming out of the side of this entity called Adam. We've talked about those things, and now it's time for us to shift our mindset and see it for what it really is. without the femininity being first, there would be nothing birthed. So if Africa came out of the African, then Africa had to be born. This earth had to be birthed. And it was birthed from a spiritual entity. And the spiritual entity that it was birthed from is that entity of femininity, because the femininity is the only womb that could possibly do that. And it was, and the Adam story is about something coming out of the side, because the man obviously does not have a womb. And we need to purge ourselves of that lie before we can actually embrace and fill that space with the truth of femininity. And we have this concept, and when I say we, I'm talking about Africans, period. Because if you look at the continent of Africa, women are dehumanized on the continent of Africa, just as they are here. And the dehumanization of them came from the European mindset. The three things, the three well-known things that dehumanize the femininity and still does it to this day are Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. All three of them minimizes the presence, the life, and the purpose of femininity. And we must refrain from joining that course, subconsciously as well as consciously. And when we are in our discussions, regardless of who is speaking or what is being said, when we notice that femininity is being dehumanized, we must speak up, because we must purge ourselves of all aspects of the dehumanization as well as the degradation of femininity. It is a real fact that femininity is the queen, and the queen of the universe is the source of all life. And the technology that brought all life into existence and maintains all of that life is melanin. It's more of a technology than it is of a chemical. And the idea of it being a technology can be seen if we look at the different ways that it fosters life and maintains life in this earth as well as in the universe itself. So when I listened at what was said in this video, I also maintain that, I'll reiterate rather, that the balance that we seek, the order that we seek to bring into this earth, the understanding of the wisdom that brought everything into existence, we must understand that absolutely nothing changes unless the energy of African femininity is at the helm. It's just that simple. As long as masculinity is at the helm, that's a problem. And the reason it is a problem is because masculinity is at the helm seeking a line about bringing everything to existence because of that mindset that it has embraced. when you think about it, every single religion that we have embraced as a religion was brought into existence by masculinity with no input from femininity. Even the Buddha of enlightenment was masculine. It came from femininity. And the womb that brought Buddha into existence was the one that was reverenced. Buddha was not reverenced at all. The mother of Buddha was reverenced because she brought into the earth a source of enlightenment. And when the Neanderthal embraced Buddha, they removed the mother from the space of being reverenced and put the maleness or the masculinity in its place. And we see that throughout history. And here we are right now on the cusp of change. And being on the cusp of change does not mean things have changed. It's simply being on the cusp of it. And we don't go beyond the cusp of change until we understand the source of that change, embrace the source of that change, reverence the source of that change, and see the masculinity of the the femininity of the African mindset being that of Elohim. Questions or comments? Does that make sense to you guys?
Pastor, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Honor to the ancestors. I have two questions. One, is the universe a Kabbalah? And when Malcolm X said that we did not land on Plymouth Rock landed on us. Does that have the significance of what we're talking about this morning
In a sense,
and what we have heard?
in a sense, it does. The whole universe, when you asked about the whole universe being a cable line, the whole universe is life itself. And that life source is what brought this human source into existence. And when the speaker was talking about Africa coming out of the African, he was talking about from the universe itself, from the source of life. When Malcolm made the statement about Plymouth Rock landing on us, what he's saying is that white people landed on Plymouth Rock, and Plymouth Rock, white people landed on us. White people crushed us. The first people that the Europeans came in contact with when they landed on Plymouth Rock was not the people who we have been shown to be Native Americans. It was us. And the people who were Native Americans were more to the north, like in Alaska, Canada, and in the northwestern parts of the U.S., all because they migrated across the Bering Strait, the ice bridge, and then begun to migrate into the interior, the upper portions of this country, or this landmass called America. So Malcolm was talking about the crushing that we underwent as a result of the Europeans enslaving us, killing us, attempting rather genocide against everything and everyone that was already here. I hope that helps you, Evan.
It does, but it makes me feel, or it makes me think that we've always been here.
We have always been here.
Yeah, yeah.
Let me say something else about that. This idea about us going through this and it being a repeat of Reconstruction. This is a repeat of early America. The reason Andrew Jackson is a favorite of Donald Trump is because Andrew Jackson did exactly the same thing that Donald Trump is doing. The Supreme Court said that you cannot remove, as they put it, Indians from their land. And he said, okay, but I'm going to do it anyway. And he did it. The whole idea of the Trail of Tears was done illegally. But nobody paid the price for it. Is that not what Donald Trump is doing right now? Ignoring the laws of the land? So the question becomes, at least to me, why is it that history repeats itself? The reason history repeats itself is because the energy of domination, the energy of abomination is still in the earth. And the Creator allows that same energy to rear its head for the express purpose of those who are the God in this earth to transpose that energy, to repurpose that energy, to carry that energy through a metamorphosis so it would become productive as opposed to destructive. So when we are here talking about the things that happen in history and looking at those things in relationship to how the Bible was manipulated, the Creator is simply giving us the opportunity to balance the earth as it was from the beginning. Does that make sense? Guys, questions?
It does.
So that's where we are. Now, if I don't want you to know who you are, if I want to control you, then I also know that you have a highly spiritual nature about you. That is your essence. So I take your sacred writings and manipulate them into something totally different than what they were. And then I take you and put you under my control by any means necessary. And by doing so, by putting you under my control by any means necessary, I force you to embrace what the sacred writings that I have manipulated. And by the third or the fourth generation, because of that brutality, you not only have embraced it, but you have taught your children to embrace it as well. And now your children only know Christianity, or your children only know Islam, your children only know Judaism. And they embrace that. And when they embrace that, what they have actually done is accepted the bondage as being the only way of life. And when we began to decode the sacred writings and see what they are actually saying, that is when the eye opens and the invisible shackles begin to fall. So that's where we are right now. Does that make sense?
It does, but I have one more comment for right now. So I don't really get into politics. I've never been able to, I never did until I started with the Faith Family. But what if Donald Trump is uprooting all the lies and exposing all the lies that have been told and all the stuff that has been done? What if that's his purpose for coming into the earth, to uproot all that stuff?
Well, we've talked about that. It is his purpose. That's why we have embraced his presence. He's the best thing that ever happened to humanity. Let me tell you something that's happening that we have not spoken about. In Donald Trump's first term, he terminated the positions of everyone who sat on the council, the board of the WTO, the World Trade Organization. The World Trade Organization is the arbitrator of tariffs of world trade, and they have the power to enforce their decisions. So Donald Trump removed all of representation from the U.S. from the WTO. And he wanted to do bilateral tariff negotiations as opposed to going through the WTO. When Biden came into office, he did not reappoint anyone. He left it vacant. You ask, what is the significance of that? When that space was left vacant as a result of what Trump had done, countries, the first one was Indonesia, began to control the export of nickel, of their materials. And they started to build processing plants. So you process the nickel, the materials in that country, and then they are exported as a finished product, as opposed to taking the minerals from the ground and processing them in another country, and you getting pennies on the dollar for it. So now there's an uproar in the WTO. They want to separate from the U.S. because without the U.S. representation, there's no quorum, and they cannot vote to control the exporting of minerals from other countries. So the bottom line is this. Without even knowing what they were doing, both Biden and Trump, thinking that they were putting the U.S. in a more powerful position to have bilateral negotiations because the U.S. had the strongest economy. They could get away with it. But what they were actually doing was opening the door for countries, whether it was Indonesia or whether it was Burkina Faso, to nationalize their material, their minerals, and process them in their country without having to go through this European body called the WTO, which was designed to make sure that Europeans and the European countries, as well as this country, have total control over the export of raw materials from other countries so that they could control the economy of all of the countries in the world that had minerals that they wanted. But now that has shifted. So what am I saying? I am saying that Donald Trump definitely was put in this earth to bring about an uncovering of everything that has kept the earth, people of color in this earth in servitude, and kept all of us being dependent on the European mindset for existence. So it did not just start with this office now. It started when he first went into office. And this is something that you don't read about in the papers. It's like behind the scene actions that's taking place because they really don't want people to understand the true nature of the WTO. And that being controlling the minerals in every nation on the earth. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so that's why you say don't worry about the executive orders that we see being signed. Don't even worry about what's happening on the face of the earth, because everything is for the good of the African.
Everything is for the good of humanity.
Humanity, yes. Thank you for correction. Yeah, humanity. Okay.
Everything is for the good of humanity, but it won't be good. Humanity won't experience that until the African mindset is embraced in the earth. So, and I went through that whole thing about the WTO for the express purpose of saying to you that there are many things that are being put in place that brings balance that we are not aware of as a whole. Any questions about that or comments? Okay. Any questions? Are there any questions about the leadership, the necessity, and of the leadership of African femininity? No question. No comments.
I have a separate question to ask.
Sure.
My question is, Africans in America are the source to correct the issues in the US and ultimately the world. But in the Bible, it says that the stone that the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. My question is, are African Americans the chief cornerstone that the builders rejected? And are the builders the Africans?
African femininity being at the helm is definitely the chief cornerstone, but it cannot do what it does without masculinity because of the balance needed. So having said that, the African mindset is the chief cornerstone that's placed in the building, but it was rejected. Why was it rejected? What does a cornerstone do? The cornerstone in a building, what does it do? Behind that cornerstone in that building, there are historical documents and symbols and emblems that represent that period of time. And the history of the period of time that the cornerstone was inserted in the building can be seen or understood by virtue of removing that cornerstone and taking the documents out and perusing them. So if the African is the chief cornerstone, then that means that everything that's happened over the course of the history of this earth is within the purview of the African. And that is the reason we have to revert to a beginning in order for us to not only understand the present, but to bring the energy into balance in this present. And that all of that has been warped by virtue of the church, Christianity, and other religions have deemed the chief cornerstone to be an entity that was not in bodily form. What has been rejected is the God in this earth that Sheldon spoke about earlier. What has been rejected is the energy of balance and righteousness. What has been rejected is the ingenuity and creativity of the African. And that can be seen every single day. the way that, well, this is doing something totally different, but not totally different, but connected to that, but in a different way. So I want to ask you first, do you understand? Does that make sense what I just said, Myra?
Some of it does.
What doesn't?
I just have to listen to the video again.
Okay, let me restate it, okay? What I'm saying is that the chief cornerstone in a spiritually that was rejected is the African spirituality. The essence of righteousness in this earth has been rejected. And the chief cornerstone, regardless of how big the building is, how much space it has, that chief cornerstone, within it, what it covers is the history of a time period. So if you take that entire building and you look at the magnitude of its size, the broadness of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, these three religions are the largest on the face of the earth. And in the small section of that is African spirituality, which is the cornerstone that's been rejected. How was it rejected? By saying that African spirituality is demonic, by saying that voodoo is demonic. Everything that's African is demonic. Yet, everything that is Christian, Islamic, or Jewish is acceptable. And these are the things that has not only dominated the earth, but has sought to destroy the gods in this earth who are Africans for the express purpose of greed. Does that make more sense?
It does. So is it safe to say that, how can I put it? Is it safe to say that the chief cornerstone, if they reject themselves, that's even more dangerous?
Well, it is dangerous because there cannot be an understanding of your essence if you're rejecting yourself. And that's where I was headed in a manner. Okay. I guess what I'm saying is that hold for 1 second, please. Can you pause it for a second? For some reason, thank you. What I'm saying is that if you don't know who you are, you become a part of the problem. And when we look at how the African femininity or the African female is being treated, we see where it came from. It did not come from Africa. In terms of the history of Africa, it came from Europeans. The idea, okay, I'm getting ready to step in here. The idea of being a wife is totally European. It has nothing to do with African, has nothing to do with spirituality at all. Because in that relationship of marriage, the female is expected to give up her identity. She gives up her last name. She gives up her freedom. What am I saying? The expectation of the woman is for her to rear the kids, to have the kids, to rear the kids, to be a source of sex, to be the domestic employee in the house without pay, and to give up her career. She's not expected to have any real ambitions for herself. And then, if a divorce takes place, who has to rebuild their life? The woman. She has to scramble to not only rebuild her life, but take care of children without child support. So that is not the African way. this domination, this thing of a wife in this nation is in this European mindset is total domination of femininity. This is the clearest example to me of how femininity has been um, relegated to a place of servitude as opposed to a place of leadership. And there's much more involved in this idea of the wife issue. but those are a few of those things that exist in this idea of marriage, and a wife having to be the servant as opposed to the equal or the leader. Now, this is the other part of it. Regardless of what a man says or does, whatever that woman decides in that house is going to be successful if he supports it. If he doesn't, it's going to fail. So, what am I saying? In a background way, just like the African woman in this country has been the embodiment of deliverance for us, but yet have been relegated to a place of silence, have been abused more than any other group of people on the earth, even though they're the best educated on the earth, even though they are the chief entrepreneurs on this earth. Women, African women, has been treated like they are servants as opposed to equals or leaders. And if it were not for the African femininity, we would not be where we are in terms of seeing the reality of what we are dealing with and understanding the nature of who we are as who we were created to be, rather, because the first nurturer in your entire life is that female. Does that make sense? Questions, comments?
I have a comment.
Yeah.
I 100% agree. I just wanted to add the male need for leadership, or the, should we say, the selfish desire for leadership that we see within the context of the European mindset that we still exist within. That stereotypical male need to be the quote unquote leader comes out of a more base sort of masculine need to deal with situations that are life or death, whether or not they actually are. But it's the idea that you have to defend, protect, etc. That male need to be in a position of leadership only arises within a group consciousness when the state of the world is already terrible. Within a balanced and healed state of the world, it is the feminine that leads, and that perpetuates that harmony and balance. The masculinity has no inherent instinctual desire to lead unless it perceives that something is already very wrong, and in its own various ways in which it is confused or selfish, it can make that much worse. But the point is that male leadership becomes a thing when the state of the world is already thrown off balance.
And it takes it further off balance.
Yeah.
I was gonna say I have 2 points. One, to what Nick just said, is the idea of firefighters getting to the point where they actually love fires, in a sense, because it gives them a sense of belonging. So it's like they need that for their very existence in terms of what they value and see themselves as. The other point that I was thinking about quickly was in terms of the European mindset. Both things kind of run parallel, civil rights and women's rights. And it is an attempt to try to restore things that should naturally be there for two groups that are very powerful, but the European has, I'm not going to say they tried to undervalue, because the very point of them trying to control it, in a sense, is acknowledgement of great value towards that thing. But the point is to try to actually control it. And even in the sense of what we were talking about in terms of women, and we're talking about Kabbalah, and we talk about the association with God, goes back to trying to, in a sense, control God or be God in terms of being that itself, like being a God of itself, being a ruler of itself. That's what I saw as you kept talking about the women and thinking about women's rights and civil rights in this country. If those things were actually in a natural place, of course, there would be no need for the fighting of these rights that we're actually talking about. I'm finished.
And as you said, I want to reiterate this. Fighting for these rights is not fighting for these rights. It's fighting to maintain control. That's the essence of it. Hear that. It's fighting to maintain control. And I, like other males, have felt like we are supposed to fix everything. We have felt like that, and still do. When in essence, it's not so much fixing everything as it is controlling everything. Because if you really give thought to it, when you talk, when you there's something you think you are fixing, you have that conversation with a female. And I'm not just talking about people who are married. I'm talking about period. What you usually walk away with is a better understanding of how you should approach it. So the question is, what have you just done? You have gone to the source and gathered an understanding from the true leadership as to how to approach this issue so that it doesn't become a worse problem, a problem that has become grown out of control. And you are not making an effort to control it. You're actually trying to solve it. Does that make sense? Comments, questions?
I have a question. When you were talking about feminine, the Black feminine energy, the thing I thought about is, would the situation we're in now in terms of mindsets and all of that, does it have anything to do with the fact that for Black women stopped influencing white families? And what I mean by that is, in the 50s and 60s, there were a lot of Black women who were working for white families and basically raising their kids. So when that all sort of shifted and stopped, it seems like the sort of peaceful mindset stopped, for lack of a better word. Does that have anything to do with that? The fact that all shifted?
Yes, that it has a lot to do with that. What happened during those periods, though, the African women who were raising their kids were embraced, sometimes embraced by their family, but they didn't care anything else about other Black people. Only the one that worked in the house, that was it. So it didn't bring as much balance as we thought. And that led to something else that I talk about. Go ahead, Audrey, then I'll mention it.
Well, Well, I wasn't thinking more, I was thinking more about the kids rather than the parents.
That's
The
what I'm
influence
talking
on the
about.
kids.
The kids love the person who reared them. All other Black people were different than the one who reared them.
So when the influence on the kids' mindset.
Yes. And if you look at that period that you just talked about, if you look at that period during education, before we were going to school with Europeans, what did we do? We invented the traffic light. We invented the refrigerated truck. It's all these things we brought into existence prior to 1954. If you look at that 10-year period between 1954 and 1954 to 1974, that 20-year period, if you look at it, what you will see is a parallel to the period when we seemingly lost control of our children. Why is that? Because between 1954 and 1974, white people said that they wanted to integrate, but that was not it. The Southern minds, the racist minds, whether they were in Chicago or in South Carolina, didn't matter. The mindset was not told what the real issue was. The issue was not doing what King wanted folk to do. They saw the progress of African children, and between 54 and 74, they did something about it. They integrated. And when they integrated, they fired the Black teachers. And when they terminated the Black teachers, if you look at that period of time, there were more teachers terminated in that 20-year period than ever before of any profession in this country. And still to this day, it exceeds any termination from any career-based business or in this country. Why did they do that? Because they wanted to put the control of the children under white education, diminishing self-esteem and separating from the communities. And from that point forward, we have seen our children fall deeper and deeper into a state of chaos. And we've also seen that the children, the brightest of our children, has been pushed into the streets rather than embraced in the schools, as we once were. That was purposely done. So that period of time is a time that we can look at and see how we got to where we are in regards to how the society was altered. Does that make sense, Audrey?
Yeah, and I didn't really think about it like that. It took control over our children, plus the influence of the Black female was taken away from their children. So it was like a double whammy kind of thing.
Yes, and also, if you look at what happened in 1974, and the reason I said 74, because that was a period that I really looked at, okay? In 1974, during that period of integration, And I'm sure it was the subsequent years, I'm sorry, the previous years as well. What happened is the black kids were put in the back of the class and was never called on. And when they would say something about it, they were labeled to be a troublemaker. And the black male kids were not challenged, but they were provoked. And when they provoked them, they ended up being labeled. And they ended up being pressured out of school. And the biggest part of that is this, and this is going to, you ain't gonna like this, but I don't give a rat's behind, I'm gonna say it. The problem was that the black students were smarter than the white students, and they pushed them out. That's what the problem was. They wanted to minimize a formal education for students of African descent. And when they did that, they realized that in order for the white kids to excel, they had to dumb down the black kids. And that's exactly what they did. You can call it racism that I'm speaking. You can call it anything you want, but you know what I call it? Reality. That's simply the truth. Those are facts. So, understanding that, a lot of people, especially in the 60s, started organizing schools for our children. In Greensboro, North Carolina, especially around New York, DC, New Jersey, or the northeastern states, organized schools for our children. And every school that was organized for the educating of our children was labeled as being radical or nationalistic schools. And that meant that they were going to be attacked by the FBI. They're going to be surveyed by them. They're going to be provoked by police department through raids, etc. And that happened. That happened. When we were at Hilton Head, and we set up a school during the summer to teach our kids how to read and to teach them history. I was there with 4 females and me. And when we were teaching, I remember my briefcase went missing. And they found the red book of Mao Zedong. And a warrant was issued for my arrest for insurrection. And when I found out that SLED was looking for me, I left. And whether still exists now, I don't know. But Matthew Perry, the civil rights attorney, is the one who let us know that warrant had been issued. So intimidation tactics pushed people from African people from organizing these schools to a place of complacency. And that's where we are today. That's where we are today. But guess what? In spite of all of this, guess who excelled? The African woman. In spite of all of that, because their focus was on the African male, because they had been taught, they mean especially white women, had been taught that masculinity is the leadership, without realizing the true leadership was the African woman. And that is the reason that males who were in professional sports, the first thing they say on TV is what? They didn't say, "Hi, Daddy," they say, "Hi, Mom." Even though they had both parents at home, it was always Mom. You could talk about dad, but you can't talk about mama. That was the attitude. And all of that changed with integration, with assimilation, because it wasn't integration, with them taking over the control of education, educating the African child. I'm done. Any questions or comments?
Pastor Jay, this is Evelyn. I'm listening to what you're talking about, what we're talking about this morning. I tell you, the life of an African has been hard. I was thinking about my mom. She used to take care of the European children, and we didn't see much of her. And I know it hurt her that she couldn't be with us. She was with someone else's children. But the more we talk, the more I reflect back on my youth and the things that our parents had to go through in order to make it in this world. But it's heavy. What we're talking about is real heavy. And I don't want to cry, but maybe that's what I need to do, because it won't be just for me, but it's just hurt. And that's all I want to say. Thank you for listening.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I got something to say, but I don't want it to get me in trouble because it has potential to do so, I guess. I was listening to all the conversations we've had before about masculine and femininity, and it made me think about homosexuality. I would suppose that homosexuality was has its root as well in femininity. Just suppose that even on the masculine side, looking at two men together, I was thinking about the book, The Spirit of Intimacy, and they have a day there that what they do is the men identify with what the women go through. And one of the things they do is they shed tears, and the women do the same thing as the men. But the men have an opportunity to see their, and these are my words, their softer side. And looking at homosexuality, the men, for example, is that a way that they get to see their softer side? A masculinity gets to see a softer side without being challenged or belittled. In a sense, they are belittled, but you know what I mean. So two women together, we never think about. They're going to find balance, and yeah, one may dominate the other in a sense, but they find balance in a more easier way. But just suppose that all of that, whether masculine or male or female or two men or two women, all of it was born with the express purpose of finding balance, of bringing balance in the earth. Does that make sense at all? Without me making a fool of myself.
Yeah.
I'll speak to it, but I think Nick, would you say something?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I think there's a lot to sort of unpack metaphysically and spiritually about homosexuality. And I've sort of think a variety of things about it, and have sort of learned a lot of stuff about it just from a lot of the sources I read that I agree with. But
Excuse me, Nick.
yep.
I just need you to speak up a little louder.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
I was going to say, I said there's a lot to sort of unpack metaphysically and spiritually about homosexuality, but let me just not to go, into that topic at this point too much, but I think it's a variety of things, including whenever you reject the feminine, it will come out in some way.
Yeah.
And that's part of it. And another thing is, in some ways, it's, at least metaphysically, I believe, it's a sort of rejection. Rejection is too strong a word. It's like a response to the state of the consciousness of the earth and the consciousness of groups and populations of people. So it's similar in that it's an attempt to deal with the sort of chaotic nature of the spiritual atmosphere that we find ourselves in.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think there's a lot there, but and that's outside of it's related to, but sort of outside of the real issue that a lot of men have with male to male intimacy. And male to male intimacy, in the way, I'm not talking about homosexuality. I mean, like, you're scared to hug your male friend because you don't want to be, you sort of in your state of fear and the way you've been taught, you don't want to be perceived as gay, for example. That is a sort of confusion that adds to the problem. But anyway, so those are all of the different things that I see in this whole phenomenon that we will address at some point.
I agree with Nick 100%. And it is a lot to unpack in that. And I don't think we will unpack 1/10 of it today. However, I will say this. If you look at two females, the one who is more masculine, presents more masculine, is the one who dominates. Have you noticed that?
Mhm.
And that's because of the society that we're in. And the same thing with two men. The one who's more gentle, more feminine, is dominated by the one who presents himself as being more masculine. That's a problem. Because what is being bought into is, again, you dominate femininity. You control, manipulate femininity. And if it does not submit, you brutalize it. And that's the biggest issue in relationships between homosexuals. The brutality that takes place when there is a major disagreement. And that's all societal. That's all a social construct. I mean, listen to what Nick just said. We are afraid to embrace each other because we are afraid of being deemed to be homosexual, which means that we have been trained to look down on those relationships, those people, seeing them as the other as opposed to a part of us. That's all I'm going to say about it at this point, unless there are questions or comments, because there's a lot to be said about it.
Thank you. Well, we've been great discussion. We've been a little over hour and a half here. So you guys, any final thoughts or questions anyone has before we kind of pause it for today? Anybody? Okay. Good discussion. Look forward to tomorrow. And we'll pick up where we left off. Have a great day.
Thank you. You do as well.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Have a good day.